move. I congratulate both of them for their courage in preserving the institution and bearing in mind that the shoe, as I said earlier, will soon be on the other foot, and you need to take a long view of the role of the Senate going back to the very beginnings of the country as a place where things were slowed down, thought over, stopped altogether if they couldn't enjoy bipartisan support, or many times bringing enough people together to go over the 60-vote threshold and make bipartisan progress for the country.
One of the defining features of the Senate is it's always been a check on the arrogance of power. And I think what we're seeing right now from the Democrats is arrogance of power. They obviously can't get their way. They have used and abused the filibuster whenever it suits them to do so. As recently as the last session of Congress, when we were in the majority, they filibustered numerous coronavirus bills. They filibustered police reform. They filibustered pro-life legislation. And as recently as last week, they used a 60-vote threshold to block a bipartisan Russia sanctions bill, something that enjoyed broad bipartisan support here in the Senate. And so it's very convenient for them, you know, to now all of a sudden argue that somehow Republicans are abusing their power. That's not the case at all. This is simply the United States Senate and the way the founders designed it to work. It was to be deliberative. It was supposed to be the place where things simmered down, cooled down, where there was a need for moderation and consensus. And what that yields in the end is stability and predictability with respect to policy, and not this constant shifting back and forth as power changes hands here in Washington, D.C. The Senate is serving in that role. The legislation we have before us is something I think, as you know, we have pointed out numerous times, is a manufactured crisis. It's designed to distract, I believe, from the Democrats' failure on so many levels. I mean, they have not been able to pass their massive spending and taxing spree, which the spending that they've already done has had an inflationary effect. We've got the highest inflation in 40 years. The tax increases that they want to put on the economy would hurt the economy even more. The inflation is effectively a de facto pay cut for every family in America because at 7%, most people aren't getting a 7% pay raise year over year. And you look at the crisis at the border, you look at their failures on national security and foreign policy, you look at the crime that we're seeing in our cities, you look at the energy policy in this country where we're now imploring or pleading with OPEC to produce more oil because this administration has shut down energy projects in this country. There's just on so many levels failure. That's what this is about. And so they've created a manufactured crisis and are attempting to use and essentially destroy the rules in the Senate, the essence of the Senate, to accomplish a very partisan objective, and that is to give them an advantage in the next election. That's what this is about, nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. And I'm grateful, as the leader pointed out, for at least a couple of Democrats. I hope there are more today when we have this vote this evening who will understand what's at stake here and what they're doing and what it means for the future of this country if they succeed.
The President will be holding a rare press conference today, and he's going to try to explain away his very poor approval numbers by saying he has a communications problem. The President doesn't have a communications problem. He has an agenda problem. The American people understand fully what Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are trying to sell. The American people aren't buying it. Last Thursday, President Biden stood right at this very spot, and what you saw was a president who was failing and flailing. Failing to address the needs of the American people, failing to talk about the things that they know are important to their own lives. That's why they view him as inept, ineffective, and only 1 in 3 Americans believe that he is actually doing what they need in their lives to help them in their major concerns. And when I say he is flailing, all you had to do is listen to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press this Sunday, who said that the President had one of his worst weeks as President of the United States. These are problems that the President brought on himself. He went to Georgia last week, and he basically said half of the country were racists and traitors. It reminded me of Hillary Clinton calling all of us deplorables. This president ran for office as being a uniter. The speech was very divisive. And then he referred to all of us that you either choose to stand with him on changing voter laws or with Bull Connor. Well, who was Bull Connor? Well, number one, he was a Democrat, and he's a white supremacist. And he turned fire hoses on civil rights protesters and their children. And then he unleashed attack dogs on them. Is that how Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders view all Republicans as well as 2 Democrat senators at a time when it's actually easier to vote than ever before, when there's record turnout in voting? The facts don't lie, even though the president might. I will tell you, this is a president who goes to Georgia, but the laws in voting in Georgia are easier than they are in his home state of Delaware or Chuck Schumer's home state in New York. Why aren't they up there pounding their chests and calling the people in Delaware and New York racists and traitors? This is a president, if he wants to ever pull back from this failing presidency, needs to start to focus on the things that the American people are concerned about, and it's their pocketbooks and it's inflation.
Well, for at least 20 years, Democrats in Washington have thought it was to their advantage to nationalize and federalize the election process. Thought it was to their advantage to have no laws that really led to either ballot security or voter registration security. And we're seeing that again today. You know, after the 2000 election, Democrats wanted to nationalize the elections because of the voting equipment. After 2016, they wanted to nationalize the elections because of voting security. After 2020, they wanted to nationalize the elections because states were passing election laws that were in almost every case a step forward that just might be paring back a little bit from the extraordinary positions they took and should have taken during the pandemic. Every year is not a pandemic. Legislators are doing what they're supposed to do. One size almost never fits anybody, let alone one size fits all. It's not the right solution, but it's certainly not a new solution. They're just every 2 years or every 4 years or every 6 years, there's a different reason why Democrats want to take over the elections and run them from Washington, D.C. instead of state capitals and local county courthouses.
On Monday, I began my 99-county tour and was able to get out and visit with a number of Iowans across the state. And you know what Iowans weren't talking about? They weren't talking about elections takeover by the federal government. They weren't talking about how important it was to get rid of the Senate filibuster. What they were concerned about? Inflation. So many of those Iowans are very concerned about what they are seeing and the cost of food for their families, the cost of energy, as we saw a horrible ice and snowstorm sweep across the Midwest. They are concerned about the cost of gas to get to their workplaces. That's what Iowans are concerned about, folks. They are not concerned about voting laws that the federal government wants to take over. And I would encourage any elections official across the United States, if you want to see an example of a great system, come to Iowa and take a look at the integrity we have in our elections. We set a great example for the United States, and yet Iowa is one of the states that has been targeted by the Biden administration and the Democrats, even though our voting laws are more progressive than New York and Delaware. So again, Iowans aren't talking about the issues that the Democrats are focusing on today. They're not focusing on the issues that President Biden is talking about today. And I wish that the Democrats would get out on their own all-county tours in their states instead of just existing in this D.C. bubble. And maybe they would find out what is really important to their own constituencies.
My parents are both Democrats. They wouldn't recognize the Democrat Party today. They were Democrats because they believed back then the Democrat Party stood for something. The only thing the Democrat Party stands for now is power. If you look at what I've been up here 3 years, look at what the Democrat Party, 3 years, look at what the Democrat Party is doing. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to get rid of the filibuster. They want to take over elections. They don't care if the executive branch follows the law. They don't care if the borders are open. They don't care that we defund the police. So the Democrat Party needs to go back to the party that my parents believed in, a party that believes in people, the power of the people, not the power of the party.
Take the long view that one day the shoe's going to be on the other foot. So with that in mind, if you were to regain power, would you commit to not further weakening the legislative filibuster moving forward?
Well, we don't have to reset because the filibuster is not going to be changed today. What I can tell you for sure, and even if you have short-term memory loss, you may remember that frequently the previous president called upon me and my colleagues to change the filibuster rule. I had a one-word answer repeatedly, no. To take you back a long way, after the 1994 election, a really great election for my party, we took the House for the first time in 40 years, took the Senate back. One of the things we dealt with on day one was an effort to change the rules of the Senate to get rid of the legislative filibuster. Who would have benefited from that? This brand new majority just taking over with excited plans about the future. 100% of Senate Republicans voted no. So this party in the Senate has been consistently, no matter who was in the White House, no matter who controlled the Senate, consistently opposed to changing the essence of the Senate, which is the legislative filibuster.
What's your message for voters of color who are concerned that without the John L. Lewis Voting Rights Act, they're not going to be able to vote in the midterm?
Well, the concern is misplaced because if you look at the statistics, African-American voters are voting in just as high a percentage as Americans. A recent survey, 94% of Americans thought it was easy to vote. This is not a problem. Turnout is up. Biggest turnout since 1900. It's simply they're being sold a bill of goods to support a Democratic effort to federalize elections. As Senator Blunt pointed out, this goes back 20 years. The excuses change from time to time, but this has been a Democratic Party goal for decades.
If Republicans take back control of Congress after the midterms, what would be your agenda?
That is a very good question, and I'll let you know when we take it back. In the meantime, what the election this fall is going to be about is about this administration and how it's doing on inflation, on border security, on foreign policy, on standing up to the Russians. This midterm election will be a report card on the performance of this entire Democratic government, the President, the House, and the Senate. And in the course of the campaign, various Republican candidates will come out for what they will do, what they're for. That's always an important part of every election. But make no mistake about it, the election this fall is a referendum on this all-Democratic government.
All good? All right. See you later.
Well, I still